Right. This is why in the 70s, when affirmative action first started, there was a couple of black leftists who were saying affirmative action is just opium for the black middle class, because the real issue is class, not race. And affirmative action allows those who are close to get up there, but those who are far away because of class issues are still shut out because they can never get close enough. They don't have the resources to do it.
Okay, let's address that real quick. Harvard, Princeton, the Ivies. Okay, Stanford included. Elite universities aren't interested in holistic review. That's their review process, because we know quotas are illegal. They're taking into account, are you a first generation student? Are your folks immigrants? Are you an immigrant? Like, did you really, like, I just made it across the border, real talk, and I made it how, got to get it how I live, right? And I still got the high GPA, right? All those things, minority religion as well as minority race, class background, single parent household, maybe like you, a foster child, okay? All these different things make you unique in our picking diverse students and uniquely deserving based on what you've gone through to get this unique opportunity. Okay. If you and I had the same grades, and this is, I'm not an admission specialist, but judging by what I've heard, judging by the case that they've made, you and I had the exact same grades, exact same interests. We're going to school, trying to get into Harvard. You would get in over me because your parents made less money than mine. And I'm not even mad at that though.
Yeah.
So like, sure, we could get mad at the specter of, at the imagined idea of affirmative action as it used to be, but that's not even what they're interested in doing now. They're interested in elevating those opportunities. If it were the case that you just described, where we're just like, soothing the wounds of the middle class and opiate of the middle class. Oh, we're finally on, even though you just got floated. That's trash. I hate it. That's not good. It is an illusion. I don't like opium. The Chinese didn't like opium, right? They like literally fought to get that crap out of their country, and the white man forced it on them. So yeah, I don't want it. But according to the universities, that's not what they're doing.
Yeah, I believe at the end of the day, affirmative action has its problems. I think it needs to be fixed, and I think we need to reimagine it, rethink it, go back to the drawing board. It is 40 years old. Well, actually, no, about 60 years old. So it's time for us to rethink it. But I do think it's a good idea on its face. The issues we brought up, especially with the issue with the exams, the issues at Harvard not getting in, those are real problems. It needs to be addressed. I think those who advocate for affirmative action should address those problems and say this is a real thing. But I don't think we should throw the baby out of the bathwater, and the whole idea was to be scrapped. Because, of course, there is an injustice to be addressed here. Welcome back to Relative Conscious. My name is Thomas Brown.
Ervin Bryant.
Shout out to DJ for making our beat.
At DW Made That on social media.
Follow social media.
That's at Kinda Woke on Instagram and Twitter. Relatively Conscious everywhere else. Like, follow, subscribe, comment, retweet, reblog, carrier pigeon. Let us know how you feel about affirmative action. Okay. Are you okay with being a well-spoken token? Because I am.
Okay. Let's do some basics real quick.
Yes.
Just, before we get into the real deep affirmative action. What is affirmative action? Like, what's the social science issue it's meant to address?
Okay. Boom. Super simple, off the cuff take or explanation, I should say. America was built for the white man very explicitly at first. And then, we just gradually kept adding more and more people. 60s, 70s roll around. It's like, wait a second. Whoa, hey, if we're supposed to be equal rights, let freedom ring. I have a dream. MLK, my favorite guy, my hero. And I'm a white admissions officer at Harvard. And, I don't see freedom ringing everywhere. What's really going on? And so real simple. Let's make sure we get some Negroes in here. Let's make sure we get some women. Let's make sure we get some diversity. in short. And it went from, the academy, a lot of things do. So, depending on what sector of life you're talking about, to government employment, to really all employment. At least we have a equal opportunity commission. So try to make sure that everybody gets a fair shot, not necessarily that everybody is represented. But in government, there's a lot of work to make sure everybody's represented. Corporate levels, depending on what kind of company you're at. Of course, the academy. So, inclusion, pretty chill stuff. I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance, gets to try, and they're not excluded because they've never been here. Like at Harvard, there had not never, but there were very few Black people. And so, okay, obviously there's something wrong here. If only the elite, the richest of the rich, if only the whitest of the white, if only the most masculine of the males are getting in, let's just like ratchet up the Blackness. Let's make sure we get some women in there, and hopefully down the line we get more as a result.
Yeah, it was a active selection. So like when you had 100 applications in front of you, you would actively select. Let's say you have chose 5 because of legacy, 5 because the grades are outstanding, 20 because of legacy, 20 because the grades are outstanding, 10 because their parents pay a lot of money. Well, grades don't matter. And then the last little bit, you'd be like, well, let's make sure we choose some Black kids in this, and then let's choose some other kids. Make sure you actively select those who are African American in your selection process, basically. And at that point, it would be just something Glenn Lowry makes sure to say in John McWhorter. And it's a taboo thing to say for some reason. But at that point, if the Black students had lower credentials, it was okay to let them in. Does that make sense? So
yeah, depending on which situation, this is affirmative action is widely used, and may or may not be called affirmative action, but be a similar program. And depending on where you're at, it may mean to meet the quota, quote unquote, which was legal for a time at the beginning of affirmative action.
They got outlawed.
I'm sorry?
They got outlawed by the Supreme Court.
Right, in the Supreme Court, yeah. So it's not long legal anymore. I think 1976 was the year. Don't quote me. Yeah, back in the quota days, you for sure, just to meet the number. I mean, I gotta meet the number. I don't care necessarily what your grades are. Because if I can't find the Black person that I'm looking for, if I can't find the woman that I'm looking for, put somebody in there. There we go. Fill the quota. I'm out of here. Done for the day.
Yeah. The social science problem was meant to address was representation. I don't think we had to make an argument for why representation is a good thing.
That's diversity, I think, more than representation.
Yeah, diversity, representation, diversity. Just any experiment shows that diversity is good in the workplace. It helps the workplace be more efficient. We did diversity of ideals. We have diversity, basically. Talk about this with the Supreme Court. But what does it look like today? So, like in today's world, where there's no quotas, what does it look like to have affirmative action? Because came up in the Texas UT case when a girl sued because she didn't get into UT, even though she got into LSU. That's a whole nother discussion. What's it like today, though?
Oh,
all right.
Okay. Here's the thing, though. It doesn't look right because affirmative action, as it used to exist, is pretty legal, and now there are more soft, not necessarily I need 15%, 12%, 10% Black or anything like that. We just have the admissions board looking at the numbers and saying, okay. I don't like how this looks. Or I do like how this looks. Demographics wise, let's make sure we get enough of these guys. Let's reach out to this community. Let's market our university here. Let's do some internships. Let's do some preview weekend. Give them a little taste of the college life and try to make sure these kids over here come to our school more than they have been or more than they currently do. That could be reaching out to the hood. That could be reaching out to the suburbs, reaching out to the country club, whatever. But universities actively doctor their populations to make it look like they want it to look like to get the students that they want to get for grades, for optics, etc., etc. In that particular case, it was moot because the girl in question who was trying to get into University of Texas didn't get in because she thought black kids who didn't do as well as her got in. Her problem wasn't even had nothing to do with affirmative action at the end of the day. Like I said, it was moot because her grades just weren't up to snuff. She was doing all that complaining. They were good, but UT is extremely competitive.
Yeah.
Right? So, nah. On the other hand, there are students whose grades are up to the standard of the university, particularly Asian students, and they have taken their cases to court, and I believe they won at the Supreme Court level.
It's not done yet. It's gonna be they're gonna issue this summer, and it's gonna be the death knell, but it's not done yet.
Yeah, it's real bad. But yeah, I believe that's at Princeton, and it's one of many cases that have been brought to court. But this is the one that has been appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court by is the term act? I know there's activist judges, but is it an activist lawyer who's seeking to change the law in a particular way?
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah, by a particular activist lawyers, conservative activist lawyers who hate affirmative action and have that same vim and vigor as the University of Texas case, except in this case, the numbers actually bear out where Asian Americans, according to their grades, extracurriculars, etc., should be more represented according to the university standards. If so many of us are meeting these standards and so many of us are applying and too many of us are being rejected, what's is it racial? Because the racial numbers for white people and black people who meet these standards real high, and they have a case.
Yeah,
makes sense. I can't hate it.
Let's so that's a basic affirmative action, just to give kind of the layout. Let's talk about the problems with it real quick, because this is where we come up to it's a Harvard case actually. A lot of my side knows that a lot of Asian students, the students are making this case. I don't think it's black students who are keeping them out of universities. My argument is that it's probably the white students who are legacies. Parents pay a lot of money to get into university. They dedicate a building or something. They pay for a brick for $10K or something like that so the child can get into the university. Those are the ones that should be aiming at, because the black student population in these schools be very low.
Yes. So let's talk about that, because Antonious Brown is right again. The majority is white people. Wow. Who is surprised? Not shocking at all. We're talking minority ethnicities, races, I should say, because these are huge groups. It's not a specific ethnicity. Excuse me. Asian students are overrepresented. Huge quotes, right? In proportion to the U.S. population, they're overrepresented. Right. But according to their aptitude, there should be more of them. Hey, can't argue against that. Do your best to get into the school. You earned it. Rock and roll. Okay. Asian students are the number 2 group to white. White is 12,647 students. Asian students are at 4,345. This is at Harvard as of 2019.
Gotcha.
Okay. 40% white and 40% white, 13.7% Asian.
And what's percent black?
Let's get into it. Let's talk about that. 5.8% black.
I was about to say 5%.
If you add that 5% to the Asian 13%, you only get up with 18%. I don't think that's what they're asking for. I don't think that's what they're looking for. I think their argument is that they're drastically underrepresented. So let's say that the black students, none of them deserved it. That's not true. I'm not a racist, right? I know that's not true. But if we were all just getting the racial pass, playing the race card, like the rhetoric suggests, like the Fox News talking points and the UT complainant made in court, let's buy that argument. Even if that was true and all the Negroes gave up their spots, there's 2 Asian students in particular, the scales would not yet be balanced. Yeah. And as we have all known, well, not as we have all known, but as has been obvious for Asia's privilege, white or wealth, what have you, plays a far bigger role in keeping out deserving folks when you talk about accessing an upper echelon of society. It's never been us. We are not the gatekeepers. We're not standing in anybody's way. And so getting rid of affirmative action, not a great idea, because you will not be addressing the problem and only making these extremely monolithic spaces more monolithic. The only people that affirmative action hurts in a zero-sum game weirdo way of thinking of it is that some rich white people who didn't deserve to go to Harvard aren't getting it. They're only cutting the legacy kids who are just going to be there because their dad was there, or just going to be there because somebody made a donation on their behalf. Yeah. Those are the people getting cut to allow more Latino, Hispanic, to allow more Afro-American, and in the initial years of affirmative action to allow more Asian kids in. So don't shoot yourself in the foot, guys. I'm rocking with the affirmative action side.
So real quick, one thing I was about to say is that real quick, one problem it doesn't have is that it doesn't reach its advantages. So if affirmative action was an argument and debate,
yes,
it doesn't reach its advantages because the Black population in these places are still low. So we still only have one Black person on the Supreme Court right now. We still have many universities have very low Black population representation, basically. We still only have one Black owner in the NBA, none in the NFL. Only 2 Black coaches now. The Texans hired a Black coach. That's a whole nother thing. But, it's still, representation is still low. If affirmative action is meant to bump up representation, bump up our opportunities, it feels like it hasn't reached its advantages.
Here's one thing that I really get annoyed with Black people for saying all this. Oh, there's only. Yo, can you relax, bro? We really only been whole citizens for like not even a century. So chill out. Legally, we've been whole citizens, since emancipation, but we know that didn't actually happen. Okay. Not even a century. Can I get 100 years to become an equal citizen? Also, when we talk about representation in numbers, 1 on a Supreme Court of 9, that's about proportionate to our representation in the population. I'm not happy with Clarence Thomas, but you're just looking at racial numbers. You're just looking like, man, are there enough Black people on the Supreme Court? Yes. Is there enough everybody else? Absolutely not. It's literally just us and a bunch of white guys and white girls. Shout out Sonia Sotomayor for being the one Latino. But all that said, hey, not so bad. Having the amount of owners we have, having the amount of coaches we have, having the amount of CEOs that we have, are we satisfied? You should never be. You should always want more, always better. Not always want more. Don't be greedy. But you should always want better for your people, for you to be, farther away from poverty, have more opportunity, of course. But it's not going to happen overnight. I don't think affirmative action is a failure. It just 400 years of oppression and of affirmative action we've only been doing for max 70 years. Give me a break. Let me actually work this out and let society reap the benefits for a little bit.
Okay. My next point about the problems with it, and we're 18 minutes into this, so this is good because it's a point that's kind of touchy.
Bury it late in the video.
Yeah, bury the lead. My marketing degree again. So Glenn Lowry and John McWhorter. Glenn Lowry is an economist at Brown University, or is it?
Yeah, that's right.
And then John McWhorter is also a linguist.
He's a linguist at Columbia, I believe.
Columbia, yeah. So very learned men who talk about some touchy subjects, right? Are they conservative? I don't think they're conservative. I think they're considered to be more.
They're more conservative than most Black people.
Yeah, most Black people. Yeah, but
I think Homeboy is a bona fide conservative. Not McWhorter, but Glenn
Lowry. Yeah,
I think he's a bona fide conservative.
But neither would vote for Trump though. So
no, he's not a conservative. Like other if you just give a straight up description, academic, political science, what do conservative values look like economically? That's that guy.
Gotcha. Yeah. But politically it always gets weird because
he's a Black man.
Yeah. That's a whole nother discussion. That's a whole nother episode. But anyway, they talk about when representation, lots of Black students in these schools aren't doing well. And so, of course, this is an argument that Anthony Scalia made when the Texas case came to the Supreme Court, Texas, the girl, yeah. He said, well, these students are doing well at the school. And then Vox wrote a whole article about the graduation rates. But Glenn Lowry and Graham Water problem isn't graduation rates. They said that's a bad way to measure this because at Brown University or Columbia, you're going to graduate. Like, that's just going to happen. Like, you're going to, as long as you show up to class and like put the minimum amount of work in. No, as long as you show the class with the minimum amount of work in you're going to graduate. That's going to be taken care of, basically. But the question is on graduation is GPA. It's how well you're doing in classes. Because when it comes time for internships, job placement, the GPA matters, basically. So you can graduate from Harvard and probably get a job, but you won't get the upper echelon job that your classmates are getting, right? And so there's a couple incidents where some people said the quiet part out loud. A woman at I forgot, I think she was at Columbia or was she at Harvard? She was on a hot mic and she was a law professor. She said in her negotiation classes, Black students continually pull at the bottom, basically, of her classes.
Yeah.
And people said, well, that's racist. And she was like, well, people didn't argue with what she actually said. They just said, well, that's because of systemic racism and other things like that. They didn't argue with their points. At Georgetown, they had another issue with the Black Student Union. Was like, these students, how come Black students continue to do poorly at your school?
Yeah.
And their argument was that, well, maybe there's some systemic racism we haven't found yet. Glenn Lowry's actual words that they bent over backwards looking for it. And they can't really find it though, because like there's like very little. It's Georgetown. I know, it's built on the back of
it's a school.
Yeah.
Like, and the professors back in the day, professors were racist for real.
Yeah.
And I don't doubt that some academics have some racially problematic beliefs, views. But when it comes to giving merit, earning grades, being top of the class, passing an exam, writing a dynamite paper, it takes a different type of racism than like, I think that this part of town I shouldn't go to, or I don't think this guy should be president, et cetera, et cetera. That's one flavor of racism, having attitudes, but taking action to actively discourage or give, like, manipulate people's grades to give someone who's Black or whatever other ethnicity a lower grade. That seems to be largely absent.
That's more George Wallace segregation should out more in favor of racism.
Yeah.
That's
not the flavor of racism that we experience largely today in general, and that's like so widely discouraged in academia. Like, there's a lot of thriving racially problematic ideas in academia, in whatever circle you want to find it in. People have odd views about genetics, have odd views about nationality and development, and why certain places on the globe are developed and some aren't. Whatever. That's an academic argument. But none of that should and does motivate you to commit these kind of transgressions against someone, especially when any evidence of that kind of behavior will have you blackballed. You will not be hired anywhere in academia. Doesn't matter how conservative or how whack of a university you try to go to, they don't want you if you've been found to have discriminated against a student. Unlike any other industry where maybe you can get away with it, maybe you can cover it up, maybe your homeboy can hook you up. There's no hookup that can save you from that kind of black mark on your, not your resume, but on your record, on your reputation.
Unless you go to maybe Trump University, but
there you go. That's where you can get away with it.
Yeah. So the question is always, why is that? And is that because Affirmative Action because they lowered the standard to bring kids there, they aren't doing it as well? Or the counter argument is that because it's Harvard University, institution built by slaves, is a white space, students don't do very well there. I don't know the answer to that question, and I'm skeptical of the answer to that. I feel like everything I go around was built by slaves. Like, I don't like being in DC or working in
The
DC.
whole country built by slaves.
Yeah, so like I don't know if that's like enough for me to like have an issue. Like working like when I worked as a lobbyist in DC, the White House, those buildings built by slaves, and it impede my job. But I'm
Slave
also
owners
different.
enshrined all around.
Yeah, all around. Jefferson Davis, I walked by his statue. Robert Lee, I drove by Robert Lee High School a couple times, and that's Robert Lee High School. There it is. I'm just gonna continue driving.
Right.
But
his ghost did not come out and distract me while I was thinking this.
Yeah. But then again, I may be different. Like I don't, because I'm the type of person who doesn't like really pay attention to that type of thing. How do you parcel that out?
I think it's legit. I think there's real underperforming stats that have evidence of Black people not performing well everywhere. I don't think it's unique to the Ivies, right? So like regardless of affirmative action, just like I said, like Asian students just by and large perform really well. I mean, good for y'all. Y'all do y'all thing. And Black students generally perform in any venue poorly, at least compared to other races. There are situations where we excel. Shout out us, and also shout out Africans for boosting our numbers. Shout out immigrants. Immigrants kind of just kill the game in general. Immigrants really, get into the academic sphere and go crazy. So shout out Africans for boosting numbers when it comes to Black. We all just Black. So that helps. But in real life, in America, most of us are Afro-American just by numbers. We just don't do well. And because, we're a down bad people. That's how I put it. Whether it's at an HBCU, because HBCUs in general just have poor on-time graduation rates. We admit a lot of first-generation students. We admit people from poor backgrounds. All that sets you up, like all those markers, all those demographic markers just mean that you're going to perform poorly academically. That's just how it goes down. I don't know if that's the specter of racism over our lives, watching like teenagers get killed on camera. That could have a psychological effect. Growing up in the hood, growing up in poverty, having those things impact your mind, having that scarcity mindset, as people have named it. There's just a number of things, but we really don't just be great at school. So I'm not at all surprised at the highest level that we really don't be that great at school. Do I think there's something endemic to us? Of course. I don't think it's in our DNA. I don't think it's native to our culture. Like I said, we're down bad people. This country really beat the crap out of us. So I'm not surprised. And like I said, with us getting represented in the highest tiers of society, give it a little bit of time. More on that point, we also have extremely standout public intellectuals, the likes of Cornel West and Nicole Hannah-Jones. I'm not a fan, but as intellectuals go, she's the highest honor in the Pulitzer Prize, right? And all these people went to American universities, particularly the Ivies. And there's a lot more, by the way. I'm just, skipping around.
Yeah, or Mrs. Brown is going to end up being prior to the Supreme Court, and she went to Ivy.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. My answer I always go back to is that pre-K through 12 sucks. We suck at teaching everybody, and public schools especially suck in Black neighborhoods.
Thank you. Yeah, I really skipped that part. Yeah,
which
the specter of racism, as I said. Yeah, I said that.
No shade to you, public school teacher. But
my school. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do about people like that. Shout out the team. There's a bunch of beautiful Black people working on this team. And actually, I don't teach a ton of Black people, but majority. I work in a poor neighborhood, but it's a poor Latino neighborhood.
Right.
And God bless them kids, because what we had to work with as far as like the background that they come from, matching with the resources that we got, is recipe for disaster. And that's American education all over.
Yeah. And that to me is always the issue. Like learning how to study. Like study hall at white high schools be so interesting to me. They got laptops, they got time set aside, the teachers are there to help you out, they got TAs, they got all these other things. But a lot of times in Black high schools, you have to learn how to study. You have to teach yourself how to study. Maybe a teacher pulls you aside and tells you what to do, but it's not that helping, guiding hand the entire time. Because it's time for SATs, you better figure it out. Maybe we have a every other Saturday tutorial to give you, but we don't have it like that really because we don't have the funding to do that unless somebody who just came back from college wants to do it for free. You know, that was a constant issue because my parents went to college. My dad went to PV, and he was a school teacher, so he knew I got to do extra. But other kids in the neighborhood didn't have that. You know, Mr. Brown, the teacher, was not their father, so he couldn't be at home with them going over the times table. Instead, they had their mother who had to work 2 shifts. You know, so it was always a disadvantage there. You know, in those neighborhoods, and so you got disadvantage, and you finally get into Harvard, and no one taught you and guided you the entire way. You're playing catch up basically, and it's kind of hard to play catch up.
Now I will say, as a suburban Black person, born and raised, you know, there is more because Black people are less and less. We still are the down bad people of America. It does suck. I mean, shout out Native Americans for being, you know, for taking crazy L's, insane L's, but you know, generally by the numbers, when it comes to down bad folk in America, it's us. Less and less though. We are doing better as years go on. Okay. And so that's another question. It's like, okay, you can blame poverty, but for how long? How many times because housing discrimination is largely defeated and legal discrimination is largely defeated and police discrimination is we fighting it. I'm not gonna say, you know, we've done, but we, you know, so the stumbling blocks are falling. And how many of those, I don't want to say excuses, but how many times can we say it's because of X, Y, Z? I don't know what causes this situation, but I don't think affirmative action should stop. That's one of our solutions. Another of our solutions is voting rights. Another of the solutions is economic empowerment, financial literacy, et cetera, et cetera. America did us crazy on every front, literally every front. Not only was educational resources scarce, but the education being taught, the textbooks that were available were teaching lost cause narrative, the South shall rise again. I was just had this conversation with my parents, actually. I was like, they literally taught y'all that the Civil War was not about states' rights. It was not about slavery. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
They taught y'all that the Civil War was not about slavery. And we talked about that in my classes too. So like, give it some time. Because we literally just stopped lying bold-faced to the kids.
You know, my grandmother's generation, she went to segregated high school. My father's generation was the first time I went to integrated high school. So he would have been the first child of someone who went to segregated high school to graduate from an integrated high school. This is Winfield, Louisiana, a small back town. Winfield, Louisiana, a small back town in Louisiana, basically. And I'm the next generation after that, basically. I just graduated not too long ago. So maybe my child grows up in a world that looks a lot different. But I'm only one generation removed from segregated high schools. So it hasn't been that long at all, basically. You know, which is, I think when it comes to time, we kind of get fuzzy on it. Because
when you count the years, it makes, and then of course some people are far more privileged. Some people are like 3-4 generations deep in college.
Yeah,
that ain't me. That ain't me, and that's not a lot of kids. So demographically, by and large, Black people, that ain't us.
Yeah,
we got a lot more opportunities, got a lot more equality, et cetera, but that simply is not us. So let's just, I guess the critics aren't so inclined to be gracious when they're looking at the numbers and they're saying, well, you got all these rights, you got all these opportunities, all these initiatives, scholarships, United Negro College Fund. What more could you want? And all I'm gonna say is time, yo. This stuff is rough out here.
Last thing, real quick, I want to talk about the exams because part of my issue when talking about affirmative action is the arguments for affirmative action I feel are bad. because when we talk about the exams in New York City in the special schools, there's another issue with Asian students being overrepresentative. They actually hate that terminology because
No, that's why I put quotes on it, because I'm,
yeah,
it's simple English for me. It
yeah,
makes sense to come out of my mouth, but I get why it's problematic.
because they say one student does not represent all of Bangladesh, all of China. They represent themselves. They go to school for themselves, basically, on their own merits. But New York, we're at 36 minutes, but I think we can go over it. New York, they had an exam. The exam was a standardized test to get into these special uh, baby Ivy League schools, basically
Academies.
academies. Um, and Black students and Hispanic students were not scoring well enough in the exams to get into these schools. So these schools were white and had a higher Asian population than what you consider to be the regular population in America or New York City. And affirmative action proponents started to argue that these schools they were underrepresented and they need to change what they were doing, basically. And so at first they were giving more resources for the test, trying to lower the test grade necessary to get into the schools. But at this point, they're going to get rid of tests altogether, basically. And the question is, well, why? And the answer from the affirmative action opponents that the test is racist I find it to be a very bad argument because I don't think standardized tests is racist. I don't think the tax test I took in middle school, high school, was a standardized test. It wasn't calling me nigga. It say read nigga. Like it's a test. Like do the math, basically. The LSAT, it's hard. It was rigorous, but I just studied for it, basically. But constantly, Black students score in the high 140s, 150s. And to get into these good schools, you need 160, 170 almost, basically, because so many people want to go to law school. MCAT, same way. We constantly score lower on the MCAT. And the question is because MCAT is racist? I just real quick want to parse that out because I think that's a bad argument in favor of affirmative action to say the tests are racist, the standardized tests are racist.
Right. So just so we're clear, Ervin and Tony think that affirmative action is a good thing.
Yeah.
And that we should try to increase diversity and make sure, everybody's got a shot, try to fix the structural inequities in America through education and other venues. But the test being racist, I'll put it like this. You would have to try so hard and be so smart to make a test racist in America today. Once upon a time, when our society was so racially segmented, inexperienced, because some people are like, oh, we're more, like Black people live around Black people more than they did in the initial days of housing segregation. Okay, cool. De facto segregation goes crazy. It really be doing a number on us. But as far as the lives that we live, because our society legally does not bind me from going to certain restaurants, certain areas, certain museums, libraries, whatever, I have access to all the same resources to enrich my life as anybody else. And we do. Americans live generally the same level of experience in their lives. The main difference is wealth. So yes, wealth is a huge determiner on your ability to get into certain colleges and attain wealth for yourself. If you're born into wealth, you're going to get more. If you're born without it, you're unlikely to get more. Perfect sense. We all understand that. But with race, it's not so clear. And so, the test must be flawed because we still see the broken numbers, but it's not as clear as, the cause. And that simply doesn't make sense. Not a scholar in this area. Not a scholar, really. I'm working on it. I'm gonna get there, but not a scholar, not an expert. But and many dismiss it on face value, and the level of sophistication of racism to be able to, I went to school with white kids. Some of them, a lot of them, I didn't do great on the SAT. I did all right. Everybody who did better than me was just more prepared. They studied harder. I didn't graduate top 10% of my class because I was a terrible student in high school. This is just real. I never felt the slight. I never perceived the slight. Looking in retrospect, same story. I do in retrospect, being a student of history in particular, being an educator in particular, can see all the historical racial biases in the content that we were taught. Absolutely. There's a lot of problems there. None of it in the actual test. I passed and did well on history exams, regardless of how a lost cause narrative and glorifying the heroes of the Texas Revolution and ignoring the plight of Native Americans, regardless of how biased our tests were, regardless of how we didn't cover African history pre or post colonial, we just didn't care. Right. Wasn't in the book. Regardless of how Eurocentric everything was, I ate on my life in history, hence why I studied it in college. But on things I didn't prepare for, I was terrible. And I never encountered an exam. And by the way, I'm acutely aware of how poorly Texas, our state, our standardized tests are horrendous in a number of ways. They're terribly broken. They're not a good metric of how well our students perform. But they, one, impact more on class than anything else. And two, there's no way provable that they, and they're bad at testing academic prowess. So like a lot of students score poorly because the test isn't measuring their ability to read very well. Still, all these caveats, though there is a racial evidence of a difference in outcomes in race, there's no evidence of a difference in discrimination in their ability to perform on this particular exam. Nothing in this exam. I mean, there's no white language. There's no language that they're speaking on a reading exam, aside from standard English, obviously, that is beyond the grasp of a Black student. Yeah. I mean, if we could find that piece, that okay, we solved it, change all the exams. But from elementary school to, like you said, graduate studies, LSAT, MCAT, all those graduate entrance exams, GRE. It's the same test. We can, and many of us do, perform quite well.
Yeah, I believe that part one issue is that being prepared for it. I think one issue is that to get the best grades on these tests, like you either have to take the time and teach yourself how to study, or pay for a tutorial process, which is a lot of money. For the LSAT, it was $2,000 for the Kaplan all-inclusive tutorial.
I had friends in school, white and Asian, not all of them, but I'm just, that's the ethnicity they were, the race that they belonged to. They took the paid training, did great. I was in the hood volunteering in my summers and walked a couple miles down the street to the Sunnyside Dental, where Dr. Walls, a dentist, was giving free SAT tutorial classes. And his class was great. All of my failures were on me. I'm not saying it was rinky dink. I'm just saying that's the opportunity that I and others in the hood had. And there was other Black kids in there, trying to get prepared. That says way more about class than it does race. And it ain't got nothing to do. Like, if we could afford it, if I really was about to, go hard like that, okay, let's pay for the class. But that's not my situation. Right.
This is why in the 70s, when Affirmative Action first started, there was a couple of Black leftists who were saying Affirmative Action is just opium for the Black middle class, because the real issue is class, not race. And Affirmative Action allows those who are close to get up there, but those who are far away because of class issues are still shut out, because they can never get close enough. They don't have the resources to do it.
Okay, let's address that real quick. Harvard, and which we haven't addressed. This is super long, but it's important. Harvard, Princeton, the Ivies. Okay, Stanford included. What's it called? Middlebury, whoever, all these elite, Michigan, whatever, MIT. Okay, you get the idea. NYU. Elite universities aren't interested in holistic review. That's their review process, because we know quotas are illegal. They're taking into account, are you a first generation student? Are your folks immigrants? Are you an immigrant? Like, did you really like? I just made it across the border, real talk, and I made it how got it to get it how I live, right? And I still got the high GPA, right? All those things, minority religion as well as minority race, class background, single parent household, maybe like you a foster child, okay? All these different things make you unique in our picking diverse students and uniquely deserving based on what you've gone through to get this unique opportunity. Okay. If you and I had the same grades, and this is, I'm not an admission specialist, but judging by what I've heard, judging by the case that they've made, you and I had the exact same grades, exact same interests. We're going to school, trying to get into Harvard. You would get in over me because your parents made less money than mine. And I'm not even mad at that though.
Yeah.
So like, sure, we could get mad at the specter of at the imagined idea of affirmative action as it used to be, but that's not even what they're interested in doing now. They're interested in elevating that opportunity. If it were the case that you just described, where we're just like, soothing the wounds of the middle class and opiate of the middle class, oh, we're finally on, even though you just got floated. That's trash. I hate it. That's not good. It is an illusion. I don't like opium. The Chinese didn't like opium, right? They like literally fought to get that crap out of their country, and the white man forced it on them. So yeah, I don't want it. But according to the universities, that's not what they're doing.
Yeah, I believe at the end of the day, affirmative action has its problems. I think it needs to be fixed, and I think we need to reimagine it, rethink it, go back to the drawing board. It's 40 years old. Well, actually, no, about 60 years old. So it's time for us to rethink it. But I do think it's a good idea on its face. You just got to go back to the drawing board to redo it, basically, because the issues we brought up, especially with the issue with the exams with the Harvard students, the issues at Harvard not getting in, those are real problems. It needs to be addressed. I think those who advocate for affirmative action should address those problems and say this is a real thing. But I don't think we should throw the baby out the bathwater, and the whole idea is to be scrapped, because of course there is an injustice to be addressed here. All right, my name is Thomas Brown.
Ervin Bryant.
Peace.
Do it to him, D.